Hi, I'm Konstantin Baum, Master of Wine, and for today's tasting I've scraped the bottom of the barrel and shopped where the average person seems to buy their wine these days. I went and visited one of the biggest wine retailers in the world to see whether their selection is any good. And yes, I'm actually talking about Aldi here, so let's go. Aldi is the brand used by two family-run chains. They operate discount supermarkets all around the world, combining for an estimated turnover of 85 billion US dollars. They are known for selling okay to good quality products at very low prices. And just as an aside, this is by far the worst website by a billion-dollar empire that I've ever seen. The Aldi story started after the Second World War in Germany. The brothers Theo and Karl Albrecht took over the family's corner store and turned it into the first Albrecht Diskont. Even back in the corner store days, they sold wine from the barrel, and wine continued to be an important part of their offering. Today they are the biggest retailer for wine in Germany, and they also sell a lot of wine all around the world. Aldi is moving a lot of wine, but true to German spirit, they are mostly moving cheap wine. The average price per bottle in Germany is €2.34. This is the average overall. I'm pretty sure that the average price per bottle at Aldi will be lower than that. Less than €2.34 for wine, bottle, closure, capsule, label, carton. This still blows my mind. In the last decades, Aldi has tried to raise its wine game. It has seasonal offerings that can cost up to €20 per bottle, and they also invested quite a bit into quality control. Full disclosure, as a student, I actually worked for a company that also assessed the quality of Aldi's wines. What can I say? I was young and needed the money. These days have long passed, and even though I rarely bought wine at Aldi as a student, I definitely don't buy wine at Aldi today. Or rather, haven't bought wine at Aldi in years until yesterday. I want to find out if I can find something interesting on Aldi's shelves. To be honest, I don't expect great things here, but you never know until you try, so I put my palate in harm's way to find something exciting at the bottom of the barrel. This Veuve Monsigny is the only champagne I know that sells for €12.99. It is made by different producers as far as I understand. In this case, the producer is Nicolas Gasquin, and I'm pretty sure that the producers who are involved with this brand don't really have a lot of friends in the region, considering the price point they are selling at. The same brand is also sold in the UK, where it has become the second most sold champagne after Moet et Chandon during the festive season of 2021. Sounds like champagne. It smells of lemon zest, bruised apple and a little bit of brioche, but I'm guessing they're really trying to save money by not maturing the wine too long on the lees, which would add additional flavor and complexity to the wine. On the palate you can also feel the lack of texture, so it's quite light, quite fresh. This doesn't feel like a classic champagne, it's more like a average crémant. So I don't think this is great quality, but at this price point it's pretty much unbeatable because there's no other champagne selling at this crazy price point. But I would rate this 80 points. But if you want to drink champagne and don't want to spend the money, this is champagne and it's cheap. This is the 2020 Collina Pinot Grigio delle Venezie from Italy that retails for €2.19. I checked on Aldi's website and I didn't really find a lot of information on this wine. Pinot Grigio is very popular right now, and I know many sommeliers who hate the grape variety because it's so popular. You can make really bland and boring wines with this grape variety, but you can also make really great wines. I don't really expect greatness from this wine, but let's see whether it's any good. This smells really artificial, like gummy bears and Hubba Bubba. You have a little bit of pear drop flavor there. You can get these flavors by fermenting the wine at a very low temperature. And yeah, it's a pretty cheap trick to make average wine taste intense and flavorsome. So I would say this wine is actually really boring and really average in quality. So I would rate this 76 points. It's wine, but there's not much more to it. Next up, we have the 2020 Kiwi Trail Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, coming in at €4.49. This is from Marlborough, the most famous region for Sauvignon Blanc down there, and home of some of the most famous wineries in the country. This is really cheap for a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, and they went heavy on the New Zealand stereotypes here with the label. The Kiwi, the ferns, and the mountain ranges in the background that might remind you of another famous wine label from New Zealand. On their website they're writing, with its deserted nature, fantastic landscapes and unused soil, New Zealand has ideal conditions for growing high quality wines. Let's see whether this is actually one of them. From New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, I expect a lot of flavor, a lot of expressive character. And this is actually pretty good, especially at this price point. It smells super intense of pineapple, a little bit of lychee, passion fruit. So there's quite a lot of flavor in there, which is typical for this grape variety from Marlborough. On the palate, it's mouth-watering, really fresh and vibrant acidity. There's a little bit of sugar there as well, but it's not too bad. There's lots of freshness and liveliness. So at this price point, it's actually pretty good. So I would rate this wine 83 points. So really good Sauvignon Blanc, $4.49. Man, how did they do that? Yes, this label looks familiar. I was briefly wondering whether Aldi is ripping off another wine brand, but it's actually kind of the second label of the popular La Vieille Ferme label from the Perrin family, who also own Beaucastel in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. The La Ferme Julien Rosé retails for €4.99, and it's a cuvée of Cinsault, Grenache and Syrah, and it's actually the first 2021 wine that I've tasted. They were really quick getting that wine into bottle. It also has these flavors that develop from really cold fermentation, so you have a little bit of cherry, a little bit of strawberry flavors, but it feels a bit artificial. On the palate, the wine is pretty harsh, the acidity is lacking a little bit, and it's not that balanced. I think it's actually quite enjoyable, a little bit edgy on the palate, but it's not terrible. It's not great either, so I would rate this 82 points. Now we're moving on to the red wines, and this is the 2019 Martin Fischer Blaufränkisch that retails for €4.49. I actually first thought that this wine was from Austria, because Blaufränkisch is the term used for this varietal more associated with Austria. In Germany we usually call it Lemberger, but this is from Württemberg, Germany. Martin Fischer owns the Sonnenhof winery, and this is his side project, even though it's most definitely quite a significant one. Once you're listed at Aldi, you easily sell hundreds of thousands of bottles of wine per year. This is a halbtrocken red wine, which means it has some residual sugar, and this is quite popular for mass market German red wines. Well, whoever said that Germans have great taste. Blaufränkisch can produce really great wines, but it can also produce some really average ones. I'm guessing that this is more towards the average, but yeah, let's taste it. It smells of cherries and blackberries. There's also a little bit of chocolate powder coming through. So yeah, it's appealing, it's fruit driven, it's all right. On the palate, it's really juicy, soft. The tannins are pretty much non-existent. There is a little bit of a lack of acidity in my opinion, so there's quite a bit of sweetness there, and the wine feels just round. It doesn't really have a lot of zing. I think this is an okay wine. It's just a bit boring really, but I can see how many people like it because it's just juicy and fruity. It doesn't have the texture that a normal red wine would have, and I think many people don't like the tannins of a concentrated and rich red wine, so this is much more approachable. I would rate this 80 points. It's okay, but not much more than that. This is the 2020 Francois Noblecour Bordeaux Supérieur Barrique that retails for €3.19. It is a cuvée of Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon, which is not necessarily a surprise for wines from Bordeaux. What is a surprise is that it was stored in barriques. Barriques are expensive, and if you would use a new barrique for maturing your wine, you would probably pay at least €3 per bottle alone for the maturation in barrique. So in this case, I'm guessing they just used old barriques. In Germany, if you put aged in barriques on the label, at least 75% of the wine has to be aged in barriques for at least 6 months. And I'm guessing that they just barely went above the 6 months mark, especially considering that this is the 2020 vintage. Bordeaux as a region is often associated with premium quality wines, but it's a pretty big region, 120,000 hectares of vineyards, so it's not just Château Latour and Château Lafite. If you proudly put aged in Barrique on the label, then the wine should at least smell a little bit of Barrique. This really just smells of cassis, a little bit of burnt rubber, and it's not really great. On the palate, this is really, really bad. The tannins are super harsh, very green. This is kind of reminding me of Bordeaux from the good old days when it was so tannic and so harsh that you had to age it for years before you could enjoy it. This feels like a wine that will never be appealing. I'm going to rate this 74 points. This is below average. It's not flawed technically, but this is not a wine you should buy. The next wine is the 2020 African Rock Shiraz Pinotage that retails for €2.99, and I had to bring something from South Africa into the mix to practice, you know. The wine is labeled fair trade, and I had to look up what fair trade actually means in wine. On the website of fair trade, it says buying fair trade wine helps ensure that farmers and workers are receiving a fair price as well as an additional premium to help their community invest in essential services such as education, sanitation, and healthcare. The question is, can a wine that sells at €2.99 on shelf here in Germany actually be produced in a fair way? I don't really know, but the sentiment, the idea behind it is pretty good. On the nose, the wine smells of cherries, blackberries, but there's also black tea there, a little bit of dusty flavors coming through. I get that quite a lot from Pinotage wines. On the palate, it's juicy, there's low tannins there. The acidity is a bit harsh, and the length is quite short, so it's definitely not a great wine. There's nothing entirely wrong with it, but it's just not a lot of fun to drink, so I would rate this 77 points. It's average. Here we have the 2018 Viña Real Crianza from Rioja that comes in at €6.99. This is actually a wine brand I know. It's being produced by CVNE, a pretty famous producer from the region. Aldi is doing that more and more often. They approach a famous estate whether they would make a wine for them. Those estates usually buy in grapes, juice or wine and make a special wine for Aldi. But in this case, I actually think this is the real Viña Real, especially because it has all of those scores on the label from Sacklin, Wine Enthusiast and so on. Wow, 93 points for €7. This must be the deal of the century. This wine also comes sealed under a cork. It's very rare that a wine from Spain is actually bottled under a screw cap. The wine smells of cherries and vanilla. It's not super pronounced, it's quite delicate and elegant, but it's good. There are no flaws in there. It's quite clean and quite pretty. On the palate, it's also light and refreshing. The tannins are fine, granular. There's good freshness there. What I don't really understand is whether those scores are actually for the same wine, because I don't see this wine at all in that category. I would say this is a pretty good Rioja. It's close to very good. Well, I would rate this 85 points, and I just have to follow my palate. I don't think this is 92, 91, 93 points at all, on my scale at least. So yeah, 85 points. So if you ask me whether the wines from Aldi are any good, my answer is a resounding At the price point these wines are selling at, they're actually performing fairly well, some better than others, and some, like the Kiwi Trail Sauvignon Blanc, are really outperforming. But overall, if you would spend a little bit more money, you would actually get a much more exciting wine. On top of that, most of these wines are a bit faceless. What makes wine really interesting is the stories behind the wine, behind the label, the values of the person making the wine, and you really get no information on that at all on most of the wines that are being sold at Aldi. So if you really want to spend as little money as possible on wine, then Aldi might be a fairly good choice. But if you are willing to spend a little bit more in order to get something a bit more entertaining, a bit more interesting, you should go to your local wine shop and ask the guy behind the counter what's your cheapest really interesting wine, and then try that. So I hope you liked this video. If you liked it, then please like it down here, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. My question of the day is, what is your favorite wine from Aldi? Do you have one? Do you not drink wine from Aldi? Comment down below. I hope I see you guys again soon. Until then, stay thirsty.